Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us here today, and also everyone who's joining us online. I am joined by a wonderful panel that I will ask them to introduce themselves. Shall I start with Kieran? And just in terms of like how the panel is structured, we have two investors and two investees. Investees who have received investment from the respective investors. So I'm really excited about having this conversation where we can hopefully bring sort of both perspectives of the enterprise as well as the investor in this conversation. So can I ask you all to very quickly introduce yourself? And as I am saying that, I realized I did not introduce myself. My name is Swati Pujari. I head programs at Pathway Fund. We are a social investment wholesaler. We invest in charities, social enterprises, but through intermediary organizations, so through fund managers and through infrastructure organizations as opposed to directly. So we don't fund charities directly ourselves, but we may invest into a social investor who then funds the charity or social enterprise. And we are relatively new. Pathway is about 3 years old now, a little over 3 years old, and our focus is on racial equity in the UK. So I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourself, your name, your role, your organization, and a little bit about what your organization does. Kieran, can I start with you and move this way?
Thank you so much, Swati. Hi, everyone. My name is Kieran Carty. I am an investment manager at Big Issue Invest, and I lead the Growth Impact Fund, which is a joint venture between Big Issue Invest and Unlimited, who you guys might have heard of also as a social investor in this space. The Growth Impact Fund is a bit of a maverick fund in the sense that it was set up post-2020 specifically to focus on battling social inequality. And it's quite a hybrid fund because we don't just invest in loans or debt. We have what some people refer to as quasi-equity, but often referred to as revenue share amongst ourselves, as well as equity investments. So making lots of different types of investments and trying to back entrepreneurs at the earliest of stages, as well as investing in asset-locked businesses as alongside non-asset locked. So a little bit of a hybrid of a fund. I'm really excited to share what we've done today on this panel.
Hi everyone, my name is Daniel Botcherby. I am one of the founders of Kalda, and we are an LGBTQIA+ mental health platform. And we provide clinical protocols to help support low to mid-level anxiety and depression for folks in the community. We raised some equity investment from Growth Impact Fund near the end of 2024. And since then, we've been growing the team and focusing on product.
Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. Hi, I'm Leila Sharland. I head up the Growing Enterprises team at Resonance. So we have the Resonance Enterprise Investment Fund that's currently live. Actually, a bit like Kieran's fund, we have a mix of products, so debt, equity, and revenue share. And we work in a range of themes, and we have an EDI lens to that fund. But prior to that, I led our Health and Wellbeing Challenge Fund, which invested in Rosie in her organisation, Musica. So I'm going to hand you over.
Thanks, Leila. So yeah, I'm Rosie Mead. I'm the founder and CEO of Musica, which was a CIC providing music workshops in dementia care. We're going to talk a lot about this, but COVID hit, and obviously as an organisation, we were severely impacted, so we had to wind the company up. So we're going to be kind of focusing on that today. And what I do now is I'm a mental fitness coach. I had a kind of massive career change. I work in basketball, MBA, but I'm very keen, especially being in this room now, to look at actually mental fitness when we're talking about being investment ready. Mental fitness is a really big part of that, and actually being able to keep your mind and your mental health operating at its best so that you're resilient to challenges that will inevitably come along the way.
Thank you, everyone. So as we discussed just now, we will be talking about the challenges that you guys have faced in raising investments, in actually delivering investments, in running the company, managing these specific investments. So I want to start with you, Danielle. You raised capital from Growth Impact Fund, but that was essentially like a part of round of capital that you raised. The round of investment included other investors as well. So could you maybe run us through like what that journey was, where you had a lead investor in Growth Impact Fund, but within that space, what kind of challenges did you as an organization still face despite having a lead investor? And how did that impact your organization's operational abilities or ability to deliver the impact that you're trying to deliver?
Yep. I would actually maybe just go back a step before I met GIF. And we had a particularly grueling fundraise, which lasted well over 15 months. And for the first 3 months, we went out and were showcasing the company. And then I received some news that my dad had terminal cancer and sadly then passed away like a mere few months later. So that was like the first big hurdle in the process. And then a month thereafter, my co-founder then decided to step down as well. So it was like really like bad timing. And all the conversations I had up until that point, like really just kind of ground to a halt. And so we had like a few prospective leads that we were looking at, but when I needed to take some bereavement leave, it just essentially felt like I had to start all over again. And so then when I came back into the process, I was, and my co-founder had stepped down, all on good terms, I might add, but just kind of the length of time that we had like been operating. So I was kind of going back out there now as a solo founder and also with a completely different team. And so when I met the previous investment manager at GIF, it was incredible to find a fund that actually were willing to lead the round, particularly because we were always considered as quite like a niche market investment, which I completely disagree with. But it was incredible to have the backing of GIF to want to lead. So then at that stage, we then went out to go and find the rest of the round. And I think some of the challenges there were just essentially trying to find the capital as fast as possible within the kind of terms of the deal before having to go back into another IC to get re-reviewed, which we didn't hit. So within the first 6 months, we then had to go back into IC. And then after that, it still took another 6 months to then close the legals on the round. And so that, if you look at it from the point where we met GIF, it was a 12-month process. And that was very, very challenging for us as a company to be able to to continue to operate with a changing team. Another issue that we had was that our lead therapist stepped down as well, just because we weren't able to guarantee that the round was coming to a close. So a lot of things. What would you like to focus on?
What didn't go wrong?
Yeah.
I think just in terms of, those 12 months, right? I'm gonna actually bring Kieran here as well a little bit, because when we look at that pre-investment sort of that, I mean, is it even pre-investment because you've already made a commitment in a way? So that sort of transition phase between commitment and finalization of the deal, that phase somehow, like, people don't think about it, right? Like you've quote unquote raised the money now, yep, even though the money is not in the bank. So I guess like the question to both of you, right? In that phase, you've made the capital commitment, but the deployment conditions are not met. When the enterprise, which is almost like this transition space, when an enterprise is facing these challenges, how do you, as an investor, create conditions where you can support the enterprise? How do you, as a duo between the two investee slash investor, what does that engagement look like? And again, you've listed out several challenges, many of which like doesn't really come under the purview of what your typical investment decision making is, right? How do you, as an investor and an investee, build that relationship at that stage?
I would say that as I was in it, it felt like the due diligence process just didn't end. So from the moment that I met GIF, we started the due diligence process went so smoothly, and I had already had like a full data room available, so it was very easy to kind of respond back to questions. And then as the challenges kind of started to appear one by one, then it became a case of, well, how are you going to handle that? Okay, co-founders stepped away. What are you going to do to replace that member? Lead therapist has stepped away. What are you going to do next? And then when we were speaking to other funds and angel investors, like there was a lot of incredible advice that would keep coming through, and it was kind of discerning which are the things that we needed to focus on. But then with GIF, it was just constant emails, and just like, I would say what helped was, I guess, a mantra of I will respond back to any question received from the fund as fast and as detailed as possible, and just keep that communication going. And I think throughout that 12 months, that was the kind of relationship that we were building. And we've even forgotten that after the second IC, our investment manager went on to join a new fund. So we lost our investment manager as well. So that was kind of starting from scratch again. So that was very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, while I wasn't there, unfortunately, at the time when the investment was being made, I think it's a very common problem. In some cases we have a lot more control over if we're the single investor in a round. You have a lot more control over when things finalize, and only one sets of lawyers to deal with, only one investor to deal with. But there's a few things we try to do to help. So one of those is just weekly or bi-weekly calls, particularly throughout the due diligence phase and continuing on into the closing and legal documentation phase. It just helps from a relationship standpoint, and hopefully lessen some of the email traffic you might have going back and forth. And then the second thing I would say, particularly for raising equity, is once we do get our IC confirmation, because of this, the fact that that's set in stone to a certain extent, and if it changes materially, we need to go back to our investment committee. The pressure is on us to help work with the investee to really close the round and get things over the line as was kind of presented at their investment committee, so you can avoid having to re-underwrite the investment essentially. And I think what's really interesting throughout all of this is and what I would take away as potentially as advice is, obviously things are going to change, and the spirit, at least of GIF, is, particularly if you have a relationship with a founder, to try and work with whoever that person is as flexibly as possible, and almost expect that change and have a process that is capable of absorbing it.
Could I add to that as well? I think something that I learned throughout the process was that I think going into fundraising, it felt very much like there was this power imbalance, that I'm the investee and I'm like coming to these funds to try and raise capital. But throughout the process, I realized actually it's so much more collaborative, and it was really like a partnership that we were building and forming. And whilst there wasn't capital that had been deployed yet, I very quickly learned that GIF were on my side. And I think from the pastoral support of things, that was very evident. But then when it came to, say, the second IC that we had, it was very clear just how much the investment team really believed in what we were doing. And so then that belief really carried through. I think from the founder side, it was, I guess, that trying to bring all the investors around to a closing point, that's so much harder. And I think setting kind of preemptive deadlines, multiple deadlines, is what really got everything over the line. And it kind of culminated for us with I basically announced that we have 5 days left to raise 50K, or we've lost the entire investment. And then within 5 days, we had raised 100K. And it's just, you've got to like inspire everyone else around you in the journey. And I think that's something that GIF really appreciated, just seeing that momentum.
Thank you. We have a couple of questions. I'm going to respond to these and then come to you, Rosie. So the first question is asking, what does an IC mean? An IC is an investment committee, which essentially is the governance decision-making body when it comes to an investment. So GIF, Resonance, all of the social investors in this room, investors in general, they have an investment committee. Whenever they're looking at a deal, the team reviews the deal, the team does, all the assessments, etc. And then for decision making, they present it to an investment committee. Who's in an IC can be a very difficult question to answer, because the answers differ based on the type of investor sometime, but normally it's a mixture between the leadership of the investor as well as some independent members. The second question is, and I think we'll actually discuss this, we'll answer this through the discussion, what is an investment round and how is it different from taking one loan? And what's interesting here is we actually have the two cases where one, Daniel raised an investment round where GIF was a lead investor, but there were other investors who invested alongside in the same organization. And then Rosie, who I believe within that deal, Resonance was the only investor. So that's a singular investor, a singular loan that went into the company. So when we talk about an investment round, and perhaps you can touch upon that in a while, Daniel, your experience of, raising money from multiple investors at the same time. So when we talk about investment round, that's kind of what we mean, that it wasn't just GIF made the decision, they did the legals, contract, everything, and they got the loan. No, Daniel had to go and raise more money from others before he could unlock the money from GIF. And yes, sorry.
Yeah, are you happy for me to? I just want to say that in terms of when we talk about rounds, that's more. So equity has its very own language, which can be quite complicated, quite difficult to get into. So, and isn't necessarily something that many social enterprises will come across or work within. So if you don't understand all the equity language, please don't panic. You don't need to. But yes, so rounds tend to be equity, and loan debt investment tends to be. You might have even multiple investors, but we tend not to use the same language. So, yeah, please don't worry too much.
Perfect, thank you. Coming to you, Rosie. Now, as a social investor, you've had a journey where you started Musica, you started this company, you scaled it, you raised social investment, and then COVID hit, and eventually you made the decision of winding down the company. Could you perhaps walk us through the experience of raising social investment with Resonance, and particularly, again, looking at this investor-investee duo, what do you think were the critical elements that actually helped you and Resonance collaboratively face challenges, specifically a challenge as big as COVID?
Yeah, it's a huge challenge, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it either. I think it's really important that we have these conversations. But Leila, you probably might need to interject at some points, because I think the journey was it was long, and it was good that it was long, and we had different touch points that sometimes I forget that, we did this. So I think we were talking about how I met Resonance. So first of all, at the beginning, you were saying about you have to kiss a lot of frogs before you find your prince. This is very mushy, but I found my prince like straight away. I didn't have to kiss a lot of frogs. But I came across Resonance at an event like this. I think it was more of a broad kind of social enterprise event, but there were stands, and so I came across the idea of social investment. And Musica was, starting to grow. We were delivering music workshops in care homes. We were social franchising as well. So I think we might have had like 2 or 3 franchisees at that point. But we got to that tipping point where it was just me as the founder, not having capacity to actually grow and invest any more time or energy into taking on more franchisees or musicians. And so social investment seemed like at the time we had, a trading income was going quite well, and social investment made sense to actually then grow our capacity for employees and team. So coming across Resonance was, a fantastic kind of find, because it opened my eyes to actually getting investment for us to grow. But that initial phase was that investment ready. So again, you can interject if I miss out points. We initially applied for, I think you said, was it a 50,000 loan, which we didn't get, and it was a blow. So I think I cried when you rang me to say, but then you followed it up with, well, you're not investment ready for this, but actually we can put you in touch with Reach. So we got the Reach grant to then pay a consultant. I will always name drop Mark Cotton, because he was incredible at actually helping us to put together our theory of change. We didn't have one. We weren't really great at measuring our impact. Even though I was doing a PhD in the field of music in dementia, I was great academically, but actually measuring the impact of our own work wasn't really happening. And he helped us with the financials, which was super important and not my skill set at all. But you just can't bury your head in the sand about that when you're applying for investment. So I think actually it was the best thing that we didn't get that loan the first time, because we 100% weren't ready. But I think we got that quite quickly, the Reach fund, and then actually getting the second round.
Yeah, so you went into Reach, and then we made an offer of a launchpad loan. So we made a £10,000 investment into Musica, so that Rosie could demonstrate she could manage repayable finance and grow the business, and it set targets for you to reach, which meant we could then make the follow-on investment to take it up to £50,000.
Yeah. And I think we reached those targets pretty quickly, didn't we? Which was good. So, so then we were then able to, go for that second round. And I remember us all sitting around a big table with the board of directors, because I wasn't too sure what I needed to be asking of my board. And so I think you gave it a name, and I can't remember the name, where we sat down with the big A3 sheets of paper.
So we did an impact on track session with Musica, which is where we help an enterprise map out their impact and their impact journey and the impact measures that they're going to report to us on.
Yeah, so I think that really kind of then helped alongside the having theory change, all of that. So we got the second time after the launchpad loan, we then received investment, and things were going really well. We were growing. We were able to pay for an office. We were able to take on staff. We were working with large care home chains, not just music workshops, but training them as well. Things were really, really good, and we were on track to grow significantly across the country. And obviously COVID hit, and being an organisation working in healthcare, it's hard to talk about, but I want to talk about it because it's really important. It just overnight. I think the problem was that as an organisation, the rug was pulled from under us. Financially, we weren't stable, but the need for our work was higher than ever because it was COVID, and dementia care, healthcare, was severely impacted. So that made it incredibly difficult because we couldn't just turn our back. I did take up the government furlough scheme, which was great, but it meant I couldn't work. So that wasn't great. So my amazing PA actually kind of held things for a little bit because, I had to take a tiny step back. But we were partners on the Social Enterprise Support Fund, which was a COVID grant program, which Musica applied for and were successful in, which helped with a little bit of keeping things running.
but the care homes were in crisis. So even though they needed the support Musica could deliver, they didn't have the capacity in the care homes to even take you up on the free offers.
No, even free offers
Yeah.
we couldn't provide this service for free, as in the take up wasn't there. But I'm very conscious I could talk about this all day. But you said about what was really important. What was really important was communication. I think we communicated very, very early on, and I think the important thing was that, yes, you're our investors, and of course, as an investor, you want to be making your money back. But I remember, and it's always stuck with me, that you kept saying, as an organization, you are still a success because you are having impact. Like, we were still having this impact because of the investment, even though COVID then, eventually it meant we had to close our doors. But I think actually having that communication, we kept in touch a lot. And we wouldn't have had that if it was a high street bank that had given us a loan. And I think you very much cared about my mental health as well. And I think that was super, super important because, it was a very, very difficult time. And the relationship has continued.
Relationship
however many years after,
absolutely.
and we're still... Yeah.
Some of the things we've not touched on, and hoping this is okay, Swati. But, during COVID... Musica, along with most of our portfolio, we offered substantial repayment holidays too, because obviously it wasn't sustainable. But with Musica, because it was post-COVID, when people were coming out of it and starting to trade again, it became apparent that the care sector just wasn't picking up at the same speed, wasn't able to continue. So we continued to amend the terms, try and make sure that payments were affordable. At one point, we refinanced the Musica loan to try and offer a little bit, because it meant we could put a little bit more money in and in a more patient form of capital. So, we kept responding to the challenges. I think is that a good point to pause?
No, that was something I was going to ask in terms of what are the tools that you have access to when these kinds of challenges hit. You talked about the grants that you were able to raise, the workshops that you've done, the refinancing element, and obviously the communication. I don't know if there's anything you would want to add to that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's similar. So restructuring and refinancing is something that we've done in the past. But I think in addition, which I'm curious if Leila does a lot of this work as well, is some of the pre-investment work that people talk about, so having a consultant come in and help on certain thing. We also use that, what we call post-investment support. So if a business is looking to pivot, going into a new market, find a new customer, or maybe just change in the way they operate to have a lower cost base, or do something that can help them navigate a difficult time, that's also a time where we've, in the past and today, coming with, post-investment support to either pay for expertise to explore that market or support them in delivering a new service. I think that's actually been really, really helpful for some of our portfolio companies in order to figure out what else they could do if their original thesis or original market is no longer there for whatever reason.
Yeah. Yes. Were you going to add something to that?
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
So I think one of the things that we do, and I think most other social investors do, is that for most of our enterprises, they have a one-to-one relationship with an investment manager, and we typically have it so that the investment manager who takes an investee to committee and works with them on investment readiness stays in the monitoring piece, so that you have that relationship, which might last anywhere from 3 to 7 or 8 years in some cases. And that's really important because they really get under the skin and get to know an enterprise. And one of the tools that we used with Musica a couple of years after COVID was, because still trading, albeit nowhere near the level pre-COVID, was we did a Roots Forward, where we have workshops that we have in-house. So I went out and delivered one of those workshops with Rosie, where we sat and mapped out precisely Musica's position, who they could rely on, how much money they had, how long they had until they ran out of money, what markets they could explore that they hadn't tried tapping into. And we put it all down on 4 large pieces of paper and took photographs, which then Rosie was able to take to the board to help explain in detail the position that they were in.
I think I just want to add just a teeny bit of context, because I made it sound like COVID hit and then that was it, and maybe kind of overnight. We closed last year. It hasn't, I don't think it's maybe even, it might just be a year ago. Because I clung on, like we literally tried everything, explored different avenues, had lots of conversations. So yeah, it wasn't a COVID hit and then that was it. We kind of tried every single thing.
So on that, Rosie, like one of the things I wanted to ask you was what made you finally make that decision, which I'm sure was, not an easy decision to make, obviously, but like from the perspective of what the market looks like, what your organization internally looks like, and the kind of engagement and discussions you had with your investor. So what ultimately made you comfortable with that decision?
Yeah, so I think what's really important is probably sometimes as a founder, you can get very emotional and, you're caught up in the passion of the project and you want to keep it going as long as you can. But actually working with Resonance, I think things just became so clear, and you've said, and I know you're like, I don't want to use the phrase, but flogging a dead horse, like this was kind of, so Mina, I don't know whether she's even in the audience, we had kind of different people were helping to come up with the financial dashboard so we could project, okay, well, if we have a dip in income here, like what's that going to look like for the next kind of 6 months? We had the Roots Forward session. So we just had these various tools that all roads pointed to. There's no other option. And one of your things in the Roots Forward was it like time and energy? And energy was obviously my energy as a founder and CEO, and I was depleted, like if I'm very honest. And so, I'm a mum, and I think I just got to the point where it was like, actually everything is kind of glaringly showing you that if you keep going, like something's going to break. So I think, we had all the different things that we mapped out, and then it just made it very clear. I don't know what I did to make that a comfortable decision. I'm not comfortable with it now, but time will tell. But I think it just stripped the emotion out and actually just made it very clear.
I think the bit that we spent possibly a bit too long in hindsight hanging on to is that we spent about 12 months with Musica trying to find somebody who was interested in their intellectual property. Because for me, as an impact investor, having seen the difference that Musica's model made, I was really reluctant. I could accept the loan closing, but like Rosie, I didn't want to see that impact being lost. And we thought, well, maybe we can also get a little bit of return, help close this well. And we spent about a year trying to find somebody who was willing to pay anything, or even at the end free, take Musica's IP from them so that the impact could continue. And I think when the last person we've been talking to said, we just don't have the time or energy to pick this up and take this on, I think that was the definite final straw. So if anybody wants Musica's IP,
it's still there. Like that's the thing. I don't want it to be gathering dust. It's still wrapped in my PhD research. Like it's crazy, but it could have such an impact still. It's find me at lunch.
And one of the things you just raised, Leila, around you being an impact investor, I want to talk to Daniel and Kieran about this, because Daniel, you've raised capital from both impact and non-impact investors.
Yes.
Yes. So what is the difference? How important was the ownership of your organization's mission in your investment relationship with GIF? And also, again, going back to that, what is the difference? Do you feel there's some aspects in which raising money from an impact investor has helped you, but on the flip side, do you also feel it has been a hindrance in some ways? As you have the experience of both sides here.
I would say the biggest difference I have noticed between like a typical venture investment and a social impact one has been one in time horizon. in terms of the investment. So I think with social impact, it is you may find that there's a slightly longer time horizon in order to make that return on investment, which is always good in terms of the founder being able to have more flexibility. And then the second area is in terms of the mission, as you said. So having personally experienced, a lot of anxiety in being able to come out and knowing just how important the mission has been in my own life and at the heart of the business, having a social impact investor has been so transformative in comparison to a venture fund, primarily because it's been written into our terms. So we have a clause in our articles that kind of stipulates kind of like a mission drift. So if we were to pivot away from supporting the community, it's actually GIF would have the right to sell your shares, I believe. And I think that's really an incredible thing from the part of GIF, because it's actually protecting, I guess, your belief in the mission. And so that's just kind of just further cemented, we're in this together. And I think that just knowing that has been incredible. I'll say a third point, which is actually to do with, I guess, the share structure. So our very first venture investor actually had preference shares and liquidation rights. And is everyone familiar with those? No? So, yeah. So liquidation preferences would be, so if on the sale of the company, the proceeds would first go to the preference shareholder, so that would be our first venture investor, at a liquidation preference of, we had 1.5x return. So they'd have to make 1.5 back of their initial investment before the rest is split amongst the pot. Having GIF lead our round subsequently meant that they rewrote all of our articles, and so we converted all of our shares into ordinary shares. And so that was just the power, I would say, of having an incredible social impact investor that is mission driven and founder friendly.
Incredible. Kieran, do you want to add anything to that conversation around ownership of mission from GIF's perspective?
That was beautiful. So yeah, I was a little bit mesmerized. It's incredibly important to us. It's why we invest, particularly at the Growth Impact Fund, in the sense that the marriage between backing a founder who has lived experience and a company that's actually solving that problem. And we look to try and protect it by choosing the right type of entrepreneurs, but also where else we can in terms of the co-investors and legal documents. So yeah, just to reinstate that, yeah, it's very important for us.
Amazing. I do have one last question for each of the panelists, but we have some questions online here, and I just want to make sure we're good on time. Yeah? Okay.
We've got 10 minutes left for all questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the first question here is around, can the panelists clarify whether they're talking about investments for organizations with shares versus organizations that have no shares? So within this panel, Daniel, obviously your organization is limited by shares. You raised equity, whereas Musica was a CIC, did not have shares.
No, CIC limited by shares, but I was the shareholder, the one shareholder.
Okay, perfect. And the next questions to you, Kieran and Leila. What stage do your organizations typically invest in? Are you focused on early stage growth or post-revenue?
Yeah. So for us, it's early stage. That looks like sometimes pre-revenue, these days mostly post, in terms of having some revenue in the business. And it depends on whether we're investing equity or debt, what that looks like. But yeah, at high level, it's early stage founders on early stage social entrepreneurs.
we focus on the slightly more mature stage of the market, so we would say growth stage enterprises. So we look for a minimum turnover of £50,000 across all our products, based on experience of our fund just isn't set up to work with earlier stage.
Perfect. There's a comment here thanking Rosie and Daniel for speaking so candidly on a difficult topic. So yes, thank you very much for being so open and candid in having this conversation. And then, Rosie, I think this question's for you. Did you consider, did you have any crowdfunding before getting an investment or?
So we've been around 15 years. I'm trying to remember. At some point, yes, I did dabble in crowdfunding, and I don't remember it being very successful. But I remember just doing it on my own and kind of spaghetti at the wall. This sounds great, not really knowing what I was doing. So I think there's real potential with crowdfunding. But I have a feeling my dad might have put in more money into my crowdfunding than anyone else.
And what about you, Daniel? Did you consider crowdfunding at any point?
For a very past business that I tried to set up, I did try a Seeders campaign. That was pretty unsuccessful. I would say my learnings from that space has been very you want it to be something that people can it needs to be tangible. I think it works really well for kind of product businesses and hardware and manufacturing things. And I would say that having, I guess, now known so many of these companies that have successfully funded through crowdfunding, a lot of them have already done the work to find a lead investor or a series of investors before they launch the crowdfund. So it's kind of like the end point, it's closing the round, and then you fill up the round with smaller ticket investors through a wrap up. What do you call it? A wrap up? A wrapper? What do we call that? We'll call it a wrapper.
More sector-specific terms there that, again...
you can go to Good Finance for the jargon buster.
Yes, I was just going to say that. Good Finance, jargon buster. Leila, I'm going to ask this question to you. One of the questions here is around, can you explain a bit more about refinancing?
Sure. So refinancing is where you enter into an agreement that your previous, typically debt, isn't working for you anymore, and so somebody will repay your previous debt, and you get new debt. You don't typically necessarily get more money. You might get more investment, but it will be on new terms. So in Rosie's case, we were reaching the end point at which we could accept any capital repayments, and it was obviously quite apparent that capital repayment was going to be very difficult. But we had a new fund which could invest, so we carefully thought about it, decided that we could see a growth trajectory for Musica at that point in time, which, as we know, sadly didn't work out. But we decided to repay the old fund with the new fund, and we added additional investment on. But it meant that there was an additional 6 years potentially for Musica to find their feet and grow and be in a position to make those payments. So refinance is generally about new, softer or longer terms, or maybe a bit of additional investment.
And I think that's when we did the routes forward, because my board just weren't sure about, do we take on more finance? Is this, and it was kind of seeing actually, I don't know, maybe it was before the routes forward, where we could see, we might be able to kind of revive this, and actually if we have more investment, then that gives us another chance to actually kind of try this. And obviously it didn't, but it was working together to then actually look at other options.
Swati, just wondering, are you going to take any questions from the audience in the last 5?
Sorry, is it?
We've got online questions as well as...
So I've only been taking online questions until now.
Well, you might have some upvoting, but in the last session we also had lots of audience questions as well, and I just wanted to...
Now that we have just a couple of more minutes left, I am going to... ask if the audience, live audience, have any questions. Yes, please. Sorry about that. Right here.
Okay. Thank you, Mel. I've got two questions. One from Rosie. The RSP project, we have something called Karaoke Thursday. Can we incorporate that to musical?
Yes. Yeah, let's chat at lunch, because, yeah.
All right. Second one. Second question is for Kieran. Now, the project has a future plan. We have 30 women who want to go on a time away to Albania. We have the invoice, but we don't have the funding. You said you start from zero. Is that something that we can come to you for? But we are based out of Scotland.
In principle, yes. There are lots of questions that I would have about your business and your business plans and your growth ambitions. And I would say for the growth impact specifically, growth is definitely the emphasis. That, you know, how your business is planning to grow, your ambitions for growth is definitely something that we're interested in learning more about. So yeah, for sure.
One more here.
Hi, my name's Michael, and I'm from Black Business Founders. We're based in Manchester. I come from a commercial background, but I'm now running a CIC. And on the commercial side, it's all about warm introductions and who you know. Is that the same for social investments?
Well, it definitely helps, I suppose.
I mean, for us, we at the Growth Impact Bank, we make it a principle to ensure every single person applies. So even referrals that we speak to, we still get them to apply for the website to kind of have that bar of like, you know, it's open to anyone and everyone. And we do look at all applications that come through. So I'd say it matters a little bit less because I do know in the commercial world, a lot of early stage investors, it's intros or nothing.
I think if I'm right in saying this, it's probably where the IC comes in handy, is it? Because it actually removes that kind of who you know, like who's you've already got a relationship with. It maybe, does it add some kind of impartiality to it, which is a good thing?
The only thing I will caveat is that most commercial investors do also have an investment committee, and it often does have some members on it that are independent.
Right.
It's more of how the opportunity comes in through the door. I think that ends up making a big difference.
But time probably for one more.
But the more of, but if you can find out who's on the investment committee,
Yeah, for sure.
and you do happen to have a conversation with them,
Right,
and
it's
you
both
do get
ways.
to pitch, that doesn't hurt.
Unless you have to declare a conflict of interest. But
Just-
anyway,
Just one thing I would add to that is what I've seen from social investors. I think they put a lot of effort in wider outreach and pipeline building that is beyond direct connections. So whether it is through, you know, building partnerships with more regional organizations, more grassroots organizations, sort of trying to be out there, I think there's definitely more input from social investors in wider outreach.
Yeah, I just want to say we have a no wrong front door approach. So if we meet you at an event, if somebody sends us an email saying we'd like you to meet this organisation, if you make an inquiry on the website, we treat everybody the same, and everybody has an equal opportunity to work through the investment process. And please don't lobby our IC, because otherwise they won't be able to make a decision.
Hi, my name's Clark Carlisle. I'm Business Development at Bet No More UK, gambling harms charity anchored in lived experience. I'm also chair of Mind, and that's why I really value the lived experience on this panel. I'm really interested because every investor representative has mentioned EDI lens, etc., in one of their values. And in this moment of challenge, I think it's really important to understand what that looks like. So do you mean that the lens means that you're targeting beneficiaries of EDI who are going to benefit from the impact? Or do you mean that you're supporting, you know, a businesswoman, LGBTI LGBTIQIA plus business owner, and what does that look like in the terms of cultural competence in moments of challenge?
Great question.
I'll try my best to tackle that. It was a fantastic question. For us, it's yes and. So it's yes if a founder has some lived experience or has relevant diversity or inclusion to their own person or background. That's super relevant for us, and it's the widest church that we can imagine when it comes to that concept. But it's also about the problem that they're tackling. So we have some founders that really look like, for lack of a better expression, the people they're trying to help and the people they work with, and there's some founders that don't. So broad church as much as possible. When it comes to experience of challenge, we've dealt with this live in terms of founders unfortunately receiving threats or difficult situations. That's why some of our frameworks around support, whether that be for mental health or other types of support, we really emphasize that and check in on that as best as we can and just try and be human about it. I wouldn't say we necessarily are perfect or do a great job, because we are limited in who we are as people as well. So that's what we try and do.
So, I think it's important to emphasise that there are some specific EDI funds available who only work in the EDI space, and Pathway Fund, particularly invest in those funds. For our fund, we talk about an EDI lens because we're not specifically only about equality, diversity and inclusion, or equity, diversity and inclusion, but what we are doing is for every potential investee, we look at what do they bring to the table in terms of EDI. So is it a leadership, senior management? Do they have practices within their organisation that is around promoting progression equitably, or expanding the people that they reach if they're not particularly good at that at the moment? So we're trying to ensure that we're looking at the investee with that lens. But for ourselves, the challenge is about who's on our investment committee, who are we reaching in terms of potential investees, and how are we supporting them. So we've deliberately set ourselves up with inclusion partners for our new fund, and the inclusion partners cover the whole range of, we hope, EDI needs. So we have some focused on disability, some focused on racialisation, some focused on LGBTQ, some focused on women-led founders. So we have them to support and enable people to access investment from us. So we're trying to look at it every which way, but we are very open to the fact that we may not be succeeding, and to listening on how we can do better.
Was that lens of support visible, and did you feel it, you guys, when you were in challenge, or did it just feel like a business transaction?
No, very much didn't feel like a business transaction at all. I know that we're at a time, but yeah, that's just my full stop. It didn't feel like a business transaction.
I think to echo Rosie's point, we've had many conversations around like the support that I could have as a founder and within the business, and what has also supported that is, I guess, a bursary fund that GIF has provided post-investment as well, to help gain access to any partners that I might need to speak to. I think from the pre-investment stage, I think it was already like part of GIF's thesis originally. It was to support underrepresented founders, and so they were immediately looking at my board and the team, and like really getting to know us and really listening to us about our lived experience and why we're doing what we're doing. Yeah.
We definitely need to wrap up now, but as I wrap up, and to answer your question a little bit, if I may bring in a little bit of Pathway Fund perspective to close, I think one of the things that we consider at Pathway, as we are also a wholesaler, we're not directly investing in enterprises, we're investing through fund managers. So for example, through something that is similar to GIF or Resonance. One of the things that we're very very conscious of is the diversity of the fund management and diversity of the social investment space as well, because our thesis is that the intersectional the intersectional diversity and intersectional identities need to be incorporated throughout that value chain, so throughout the spectrum through which capital is deployed and support is provided, because unless the investor has a similar lived experience, or at least that lived experience is covered in some way, shape, or form in those rooms where those decisions are being made, that capital flow gets limited. And that is something we have seen historically. I mean, you know, we like to say historically underfunded. It is presently underfunded communities, right? So we're very keen on looking at it from that spectrum perspective. And when we consider that, we look at, yes, what is the diversity of the board, the senior leadership, the team of the fund manager, what are the enterprises that the fund manager is going to invest in, but we also look at what is the governance structures. Like, you know, you talked about ICs and advisory boards. How are these different lived experience being brought into that decision-making space? Sometimes the questions even like, you know, so we sort of talked about the ICs, we talked about advisories, but sometimes the questions also around partnerships, right? Like, are there other organizations that are lived experience led, even though you as an investor, you yourself don't have, for example, for a specific sector, let's say you're looking at healthcare, right? Generally, in investment, you will bring external advice. You may bring sort of an IC member, like a advisor member, to provide advice on a specific sector that you want to invest in, on a specific deal that you want to invest in. But how are you bringing these perspectives? Not necessarily, even if you're not able to do that across the board as a fund manager, are you building partnerships to deliver that? Are you building, what kind of power dynamics exist in these partnerships, in these decision-making spaces? So I think to answer your question, it's slightly vague, but it is very broad church. And as an investor, as a wholesaler, you sometimes do need to look at ultimately what is the impact it can create, and ultimately how is it contributing to existing power dynamics when it comes to these decision-making spaces? And I'm going to stop right there.
Otherwise, then
because
we
we
have
have run over time.
Thank you. It's been such a powerful session, and I have to say, we try to do this every. It's really difficult actually to get people who will come and talk about these things. So I cannot thank you all enough for your honesty, for your peer wisdom, guidance, tips. I always call it the warts and all. You know, nobody's here to try and sell social investment. I think you all did such a great job here, actually. Again, another really frequently asked question I get, it was sort of in the first session, is what makes a social investor social, particularly if you might be able to get it cheaper mainstream. Well, I think the panels have more than demonstrated that. It's the flexibility, it's the more than money, it's the only calling the debt in when there is apps, you know, that's the last place you want to go to. A managed exit or close is a good, positive outcome. Yeah, protecting impact is really important. And I think that talks a lot about all of the reasons why social investment is social. I think the last thing that I just wanted to say is we did get into a bit of technical stuff there, didn't we? So, you know, governance structures, social enterprise is a very broad church for 9 different legal structures. And then we also have what we would call profit with purpose. We ended up talking a little bit about equity or share-based investment in a more sort of venture-type organization. All of these terms, you can talk to me at lunchtime, or you can find in the Good Finance Jargon Buster. I'm going to look up round to see if round is in there. And then we also talked a little bit more about another governance structure, which could take equity, because I had a kick limited by share, but in this case took debt that was unsecured. And so, you know, we often get, again, I have had lots of quite assertive is the word I'm going to use, assertive audience members that sometimes say, well, the problem is, Mel, that social investors don't take enough risk. I think you probably say that might not just be the whole story. So I just wanted to finish by saying thank you all again. Thank you, Swati. It's one of those, we really could have had much more time on this. I'm sure you'll get lots of questions at lunch, but we are breaking now until 2:15. Thank you for your time, attention, and we'll see you back this afternoon for the last session.